You're listening to episode 174, Child Life Specialist in the ER. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy that you're here with me today. I am Katie Taylor. I am a child life specialist and the host of Child Life on Call. And I have a question for you. What is better than one child life specialist? It is 3 child life specialists, and that is exactly what today's episode is. I will be chatting with Sam and Jessica, who are 2 amazing child life specialists, and we get into the very specific things that happen in the emergency room. So this is an episode for parents. Heaven forbid you have to bring your child to the ER. We want you to be prepared for what to expect, and also for professionals who work with kids in the emergency room or anywhere in the hospital, so that you can learn some of their best tips and tricks for getting kids to not just get done what needs to be done, but actually have a good experience doing it. So I hope you enjoy our conversation. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners. Hello, my friends. I'm so happy that you're joining us today. I'm not alone again, which always makes me happy. I love a good community, as everybody knows. I have Jessica and Sam here, who are 2 highly skilled, well-experienced child life specialists who are going to give us some insight about working in the emergency room. So parents, if you have never been to an emergency room with your child, consider yourself incredibly lucky. But those of you who have, you know that it's like a whole other world. So I'm excited to learn from Jessica and Sam, and maybe I'll sprinkle in a little bit of my own experience in working in the ER to help you feel like you can walk in empowered next time you go. So Jessica, thanks for being here. Do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm Jessica Baird. I have been a child life specialist since 2010, so what feels like a really long time. And I've kind of worked in and out of the hospital, children's hospitals, adult hospitals with just a pediatric unit. And right now I currently work as a PRN specialist at Inova Loudoun Hospital in Virginia, where I work primarily in the emergency room, as well as covering our pediatric unit as needed. And I also have a child life private practice where I primarily support children of an adult patient who has a cancer or other chronic diagnosis as well.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so glad that you're here and can't wait to learn from you. How about you, Sam? You want to introduce us to who you are, where you live, and all that good stuff?
Of course. I'm Sam. I became a child life specialist in 2020. So I've been in the field officially for 3 years. I was actually a teacher for 5 years before becoming a child life specialist. And I started my career as a child life specialist in a maternity leave position. Then I moved to a part-time position where I was a solo specialist and built a program basically from ground up. And then now I have been almost a year now. I started last May in my current position. I am split between an emergency department and our inpatient adolescent psych unit. And so you can imagine those two units together. It's pretty unique and very fast-paced, but also therapeutic, hard at times position, but I absolutely could not be happier. I feel like I've got my dream job right now.
Oh, that's amazing. And, it probably seems like two totally different things to people, but a lot of adolescent psych stays sometimes start with holds in the ED. So that might be
Yes.
something that we get into as well. So Jessica, I'll pose the first question to you. What do you find yourself doing the most of in the emergency room for families?
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of the times I'm really just helping them navigate the space and who is who. You have all these people walking in, registration, nurses, doctors, students, child life, and sometimes they get very, very overwhelmed. So, really just navigating the space for them, helping to protect privacy as well. Sometimes those nurses or doctors forget to shut the door or the curtains all the way. And so a lot of that, and also so many IV preps and swabs recently has been like I feel like swabs have been the most stressful thing for kids recently.
Mm. Oh, that's such a good thought. So tell me about the swab process, and what do you do to make kids and parents feel more comfortable?
It's so hard because I feel like no one likes the swabs. They're uncomfortable, they feel weird, and a lot of kids are so used to having it done now. So you would think it would be easier, but it's not. It's just re traumatizing them over and over and over again. So, really giving the kids choices, empowerment. Do you want to sit with mom? Counting. I found counting out how long it's going to take has been the most helpful for kids in these cases. And really just showing the empathy. Sometimes I just get down with at their level and I'm like, this stinks. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like to get these done either. They feel weird, they're uncomfortable. I get it, but we have to do it. So, what can we do to make this a little bit easier?
Oh gosh, those are really great strategies, especially the whole counting thing, because it's a relatively quick thing, which can be really great. How about you, Sam? Any insight from your swab practices in your ER?
I actually have like a little prep baby doll that I made. I drilled holes in the nose,
Which is
and I
always
have
awkward to do with a baby doll, right? You're like, I hope nobody comes in the office right now while I'm digging
I actually
holes.
did it. I actually did it at home. I brought the doll home to my parents, and I I showed up at my parents and I asked for my dad's drill. I was like, "What is the smallest drill you have?" Because it's a little baby doll, and I'm like, "I just got to drill the holes out of the nose here." So I typically, if there's time, I let the kid practice because I have the little swab thing in my prep bin, and we'll practice doing it on the doll. But I also found that counting anything that they can do while it's actually happening, just to kind of distract them. I think counting has been really the best
Yeah.
thing that I've done too, because sometimes if there's the iPad, then they're kind of moving too much or looking a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's really quick anyway. So if they can just, count those few seconds.
Yeah. So what do you think? Would you guys count to 5 or 10 or sometimes 3? It really just depends.
Yeah.
Okay. The reason I ask is sometimes we provide some explanations for parents and they're like, it's so simple, it's never going to work. But, and I mean, I totally hear you, but it's something to help get your
Right.
child through. And I think the end result isn't necessarily getting through it with a smile on your face. The end goal is getting through it and kind
Yeah.
of convincing parents of that. Um, so, Sam, what else do you see in your ER, or what kind of tips do you think are really helpful for parents to know, maybe in the waiting room or
Yeah.
as they come in through triage?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely procedural support is the top thing, IV placements. Um, When it comes to parents, I think the thing that I do most commonly is letting them know that they have a voice in their child's care while they're there. Because a lot of them, like, they come in, it's a high stress situation, and it's intimidating when you have like doctors and nurses and you don't really know what's going on, or, it's a scary time for parents. And to let them know that they do have a voice, and I kind of, advocate for that. I'm always telling them, we can do a comfort hold. I always advocate for the comfort holds from the parents if they're comfortable with it. Because I think there's a lot of things that many times, slip the minds of like the nurses and the doctors, and because they're really focused on the medical aspect. So what I do most commonly with family support is really that advocating for them, letting the parents get involved as much as they're comfortable with. As for the waiting room, that is something that I'm still kind of trying to figure out, because our waiting room, I'm not in a peds ED, it's a general ED. So it can get super, super crowded. And I would really love to have like some sort of play space, but right now we just don't have the room for it. And a lot of times with emergency room visits, it's obviously unexpected. So like, I would suggest having some kind of comfort item, but I know that's not always possible. It's unless, you have comfort items with you at all times, which I mean, in the real world, you don't really have that.
Yeah.
If possible, to bring a comfort item, that's always helpful. Just so that the kids have something familiar. What I try to do is if there is a kid in our waiting room, I will try and go meet them in the waiting room and introduce myself and bring them some items that, they can play with and kind of engage them in something to kind of distract them during the wait, and, get that conversation going with the parents and starting to build that rapport at that moment.
What a good suggestion. How about you, Jessica?
Yeah, we're in a very similar situation. I mean, we have it's called a pediatric ER, but it's within an adult ER. So the waiting space is all just a combined peds and adults. So I honestly don't do a lot in the waiting room because I'm so slammed in the pediatric side that I just never have the time to go out there. But I will often meet families when they first come in through to triage. Sometimes those vitals and like even standing on the scale is really challenging. So luckily, I'm usually sitting really close to that. And if I see a kid that's already freaking out, I will either go and help with vitals, or I will go to the room that they're going to be in and I'll get it all set up nice and pretty. So I'll bring a teddy bear, some coloring, something to kind of make it a little bit more kid friendly, get the TV on with some cartoons as well.
Yes. Yeah. The child life specialist knows all the good channels. So that's a good person to know. Yeah. I'm just trying to think, like, for parents in the waiting room, sometimes that anticipation of like, when am I going to be seen? And that person went before me. It can be really stressful. So a productive thing you can do is just like Jessica mentioned, triage can be pretty stressful. And when we say triage, that's really when you and your child are getting to see the provider or nurse provider for the first time. So you're going to go in and get vital signs taken. Stepping on a scale can be, like she said, really, upsetting, which doesn't seem common, or changing into a gown. So when you're in that waiting room, maybe talk about, I wonder what's happening behind that door. I wonder if we'll get blood pressure cuff done. You've had that before. I wonder if they have a scale like we have at home, and some of those productive conversations to get your child in the mindset of what's going to happen, because otherwise it's like the unknown is back there. And that's probably why it becomes such a really trigger point for families.
Yeah, absolutely. I think even you don't even necessarily have to have materials with you or toys with you. You can do something as simple as playing like an I Spy game. Like, what do you see in the waiting room? Or I spy this. And you're kind of, just kind of easing that experience for the child and, engaging them in some sort of play. And, if you're doing like an I Spy game, you can point out different like medical things that you might see in the waiting room, or like Katie, like you were saying, like, what might we see when we go back there? Or maybe kind of starting this, like, what can we find when we do go back there? What are some things we might see? And then that way, when you do get back into the ER, the kid can kind of look like, oh, I see the scale, or I found this. And it just kind of makes it a little bit more of a game, and like a, just engaging them in something a little bit normalized that they might do, at home, playing games and things like that.
Yeah. Love that.
I would also encourage parents to not make promises you can't keep. I don't know how many families have come in saying, well, I promised him or her that they wouldn't have to get a shot. There would be nothing that hurts. And the next thing you know, we got to do labs. We've got to do an IV. We're doing all these workups. So, and I know even with my own child, he's always asking before we go to any sort of medical visit, do I have to get he calls them nose tickles. Do I have to get nose tickles, and do I have to get a shot? And 90% of the time, I'm like, I don't know. I cannot tell you that right now, but I promise we will tell you before anything happens.
Yeah.
So definitely just making sure that you're not making promises that you can't keep.
Yeah, I think that's such a good suggestion, because trust me, you're just going to have to do so much more work if you are not honest and truthful up front. And I know it sounds scary in the moment to say, I don't know, I'm not sure, because your child is looking to you, but you're actually providing them with the honest answer, which is, you don't know, you can't promise anything. We're going to have to talk to the doctor. What I know is I'm bringing you to a safe place who knows how to take care of kids, and that's what's important. Jessica,
I was just going to say,
yeah.
It's not bad to have to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Be honest and say, we'll find out together. And like you said, Katie, just reiterating that they're going to a safe space, and there's people that are going to take care of them, and we'll make it as easy as possible, whatever happens. But it's okay to say, I don't know. It's better than saying, no, it's not going to happen, and having them have to get a shot. And, then it causes more problems and, damage control.
Yeah.
That you got to do afterwards.
In thinking about maybe some of the things that parents can do to normalize the ER, which feels totally abnormal. I find sometimes when parents say, like, even simple things like the doctors wear kind of like pajamas when they're at work, and they wear masks like you've had to wear before. What are some other things that don't have to feel as abnormal as they look that you guys have seen in the emergency room? Like, a couple of things I'm thinking are like a sink. We have sinks at home. They have sinks in the emergency room.
Yeah, even the vitals checks. Like when you go to your regular doctor's office, you're getting your temperature taken. You're, usually have to get weighed. Those kinds of things are very common no matter the medical situation.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
I think from like a child life standpoint, this seems very common, but I think just in general, for a parent that doesn't have like a medically complex child, just having a play doctor set at home that they play with, even, when they're not sick. So then if something like this comes up, it's like, oh, this is like the stethoscope that you have at home, and we've played with this. And it just kind of familiarizes them with those tools and things that they'll see in a doctor's office, in an emergency room. Just to have that at home when they're playing around, it just kind of is almost like a preparation without necessarily knowing that you'll need it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just having that around in the house for them to play with when they're playing house or whatever.
Yeah.
It just kind of gets them familiarized with the things that they might see there.
It's a great suggestion. Do you guys have any other advice or stories from the ER that you like to share? I know some of the common things that we'll do when we're preparing kids and families is to tell them what has worked for other kids and families when they come in. And like, I just saw somebody who had to go through this exact same thing, and this is something that helped them. So if you guys have any stories about families that you've worked with that you think may be helpful, I'd love for you to share them.
I think when it comes to like giving advice for parents, two things that come to my mind is, one, your child is always going to feed off of your energy. So it's a very high stress situation, high anxiety, but the more calm that you can, stay, that's kind of going to help your child in the end. If you're feeling super, super anxious and stressed and they see that, they're going to feed off of that and then feel that way. So I always say this to our staff too, like in our staff meetings, one of my favorite things to remind them of in ED is that our job for these children that we see that have these big emotions is to share our calm and not engage in the chaos of what's happening around them. So really trying to show that, we know this is hard, this isn't easy, but finding those ways to keep the situation calm, or just kind of keeping yourself, even if you have to step back for a second and take a few deep breaths. And just because, the kids are going to feed off the energy of the environment, and you are their, trusted person, you're their safe space. So they're going to be looking to their parent to, comfort them and let them know that they are safe where they are and that they're getting taken care of. And then the other thing that I'm thinking is, when I work with kids and families, especially in ED, going off of like the being honest, letting the parents know that like sometimes the kid is going to cry, and it's not necessarily going to be comfortable, some of these procedures, but it's also, developmentally appropriate the way that they're responding. And that doesn't mean that, they've failed as a parent. If, they're giving a comfort hold and the child still like screams or cries, doesn't mean that they're failing. It's pretty appropriate for a kid to react that way, and they are still providing that comfort for their child. Even if it doesn't seem like it worked, it doesn't necessarily mean that, the child is going to now hate them or, be traumatized. Like, that's a pretty appropriate response for some things. And I think it's very easy for parents to feel like, oh my gosh, I did this wrong and I made the wrong decision and maybe I should have done it this way. So I just want parents to know that you just being there and supporting your kid and helping them feel more comfortable in the situation is huge and completely changes the situation for your child.
Definitely. What about you, Jessica?
Yeah, I also always, encourage parents that it's okay if you need to step away. I think sometimes parents feel really guilty if they are squeamish or just emotionally cannot handle it. So I'm always reassuring parents, especially moms, it's okay to step away. Like, you're not a bad parent for doing this. And I think that can be really helpful to take some of that guilt off.
Yeah. In fact, I would argue you're doing a really good job as a parent if you know your limits and you take a step and step back. Even if that's like you go to the bathroom for a hot minute by yourself, like whatever you got to do, we want to help make sure you have your time.
Yes, take care of yourself also so that you can take care of your little babies.
Well, thank you both so much, Sam and Jessica, for your expertise. It helps so much to actually talk to people who are in the ER environment. And we didn't really get to touch on some of the mental health issues that we see as, adolescents and sometimes even younger come into the emergency rooms. Jess, maybe could you paint a picture of what happens when an adolescent comes into the emergency room? And then Sam, I'd love for you to share maybe some of the interventions that you do in the emergency room with families who are on what's kind of known as maybe a psych admit or a psych ER visit.
Yeah, so when a child or a teenager comes in for a mental health evaluation or a hold, a psych hold, they are typically, brought in. They have to take everything off, change into their gown. They're put in, all their belongings are put into a bag. We have one psych safe room, I guess, in our emergency room where, the monitors and the cords are all covered up. And really, it's really hard because they can watch TV, but they're not really allowed to do anything else. And it can be a really long process, even waiting for like the initial evaluation before they can find a placement. So sometimes they are in there for 48, 72 hours, sometimes weeks at a time, waiting for a placement because there's just no capacity for the amount of mental health concerns that are going on right now for teenagers. There's just not enough space in the facilities that can take children and adolescents. So a lot of waiting, a lot of boredom for sure.
Yeah, that's really good perspectives just to prepare yourself and your child for that long wait. And how about you, Sam? How do you support those kids and adolescents in the ER?
Mhm. Like Jessica said, it is a tough thing because there's so many restrictions. And so it's totally based on the patient and what I am allowed to, bring to them and have with them. So I haven't had too many in our ED stay for, longer than a day or two, which is, I mean, when you're in the ED, like that's a long time for a child or a teenager. But since I'm also like in our inpatient psych unit, I will sometimes bring some of the things from upstairs that I have there, like games. Like I have a therapeutic Jenga that I made that I use with my kids upstairs. So if I have time and the kid's been there for a long time and I can sit with them and play that game, that's one of my like go-to things because it takes up time. It's a game, so they enjoy it, but it also like gives me a chance to kind of start like digging into more therapeutic side of things. So yeah, there's normal questions like what's your favorite color? And if you could be any animal, what would you be? But then there's also the questions that kind of address their emotions, and we can start that emotional processing while they're still on hold in ED. And they always have the choice of whether they are going to answer those questions or not. But it kind of gives me the opportunity to dig a little deeper while they're in ED. And there's been things that I've been able to then report to the doctors that the kid could have been there for a day or two and never said a word about. And because they're there for, that day or two, I try to see them as much as possible just to start building that rapport, because I would say almost every psych patient that I've had come in our ED, I've been the person that they start talking to first. Like when they come in and they don't want to talk, they won't say anything to the doctors. They won't engage. They won't say anything to me. But then they start to realize the more that I come and check in on them, that I'm just kind of like, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? Like, do you want to do something fun? Then they start to become comfortable with me enough to where then they start to open up and talk. And so the doctors are, whenever we have a psych patient in ED, I always get a call like, hey, are you available to come meet? Because they've realized that like the kids kind of start opening up to me because I'm not necessarily like a medical person and I'm not interviewing them and asking them all these questions. They're going through so many interviews for these placements and I'm like one person down there that's really just like, hey, you want to hang out for a little bit? Like,
Yeah.
what can we do to keep you busy? And even though they're so restricted, you just got to be creative and find things that you can do with them.
I love that. Yeah. It's such a privilege that kind of with our autonomy in the hospital that we can pop in and out and really just serve as that consistent, safe person, which is really wonderful. Well, thank you both so much. I've learned a lot, and I know that you have impacted some parents and other child life specialists, healthcare professionals that work with kids and teens in the ER. So thank you so much. If we want to follow along with more of what you do, Jessica, how can people find you? And then Sam, I'll hear from you.
Yeah, so my Instagram is Kids Can Cope LLC, and that's where I share most of my stuff that I do. It's for my private practice, so definitely connect with me. I'd love to chat with anyone.
Awesome. And how about you, Sam?
Mine is really just my personal Instagram. I don't have like a big following or anything, but I am absolutely an open book and welcome to anybody that wants to connect. My Instagram handle is Sammy_cakes, and that's with 2 M's. I mean, no, it's with 3 M's.
And I'll make sure to post it because you guys, she's as sweet as the little sweet cake.
Also, if there's any child life students listening, I am an open book. I had to navigate becoming a child life specialist as an independent student. So, and I told myself going through it that I am going to help as many students as possible because I know it can be a confusing way to go about it, but it is possible. And I've gone through it all. So I am more than happy to answer any questions about that also.
Well, thank you guys so much, Sam and Jessica. And I really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists. Parents, we've got a starter kit for you. And clinicians, we even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that. And I will see you again here next week.